Hey guys, welcome to Lean In. I am your host, Travis Rosnest. On this episode, I speak with Cody Wiggs. Cody is a man I met in John Wineland's year-long Embodied Men's Leadership Training. Some background on Cody: he's the executive director of a nonprofit that trains teachers in mindfulness, and he's also a licensed professional counselor. The interview offers clarity on examples of masculine and feminine energies, and how awareness of both in ourselves is important along the path of identifying our life's work. Towards the end, you will take away ideas on where to start and getting clear on your purpose without taking on the burden of feeling like you need the big picture figured out right this moment. Hope you guys enjoy. Cody Wiggs, thank you for joining. You're on Lean In. I appreciate you putting the time aside. It's great to have you in the context right here of this podcast. We've done a lot of other, events and things like that through John Wineland's program. So it's, I think the timing's really good. You're turning 30 next week.
Correct. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. This is a great way to ring in the next decade of my life. And, as you said, we've had a chance to connect outside of this, but I'm totally psyched on diving into some good stuff here with you. Yeah, right on.
And they've already heard the intro and all that, so I'm not going to toot your horn too much, but, I appreciate the connection we've been able to develop the past few months. I think this podcast, really what it's all about, right, is just using some references for some men around their, late 20s, 30s, and it's really in service, right, for men that are a little bit younger that maybe they don't know where to start or just want to, I guess have a nice place to come and maybe just relate to some of the things that are uncertain and all the challenges that are going on. And like, you're in a huge transition phase right now, right? And it's not like those things are ever going to stop. We're always going to have uncertainty and transition, but, I'd love to hear from you, real quick. It's just, if we look at, men in their 20s and 30s, like, being a counselor and doing a lot of men's work yourself, like, what do you see as a common theme around just, where men struggle the most? What's sort of a common theme, would you say, around what men struggle with most?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would start by saying, I am still one of those men that continues to struggle. I don't think the struggle ever ends. It's ongoing. And that's the journey, really. And it's, so the struggle takes many different shapes and forms. I'd say if I were to identify a key theme, this might sound a bit like hyperbole here, but I do think we're in something of a crisis of masculinity. And what I mean by that is this masculine energy or this masculine psyche or this masculine drive is way out of balance with the feminine, both in our personal lives and in our society and culture as a whole. And I think that, I can explain a little bit more about what I mean by masculine and feminine, because I think when most people hear those terms, the first thing they think of is male and female. And that's actually not what I'm referring to here.
Right on. Yeah. So maybe give us a quick clip on both energies. And, we're doing a lot of work on this too, right? And John's year-long program. And so I think that's a really important distinction. And I know many of the years of my 20s, I really just assumed male, female, and I didn't really know much about it. So what's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, the best way I've heard it described was actually in one of David Data books, who's an author that Travis and I both read quite a bit and informs a lot of our practices and teachings around breathwork and yoga. So he describes, if the feminine energy, which is something we all have, right? We all have, even if we're a man, different amounts of feminine energy and different amounts of masculine energy. So the feminine is the ocean, right? It's chaos, it's flow, it's emotion, it's energy, it's movement, it's dance. And the masculine is the ship that sails on the ocean from point A to point B. And that's, direction, purpose, structure, drive, accomplishment. And women have masculine just as much as men have feminine. And really what, getting back to the crisis here, I think this out of balance that I see most often, it goes two ways, right? So, what people talk about most often, I think, is men, learning to embrace their inner feminine, and that being a part of masculinity, right? And learning how to let go of some of that rigidity and some of that structure and embrace, life, which is feminine in nature. It's It's constantly shifting and changing.
Yeah.
But what I see as it being the bigger crisis really is this, the polarity has reversed somewhat. So a lot of men now are feminine and they don't know it. You know, they're living in this state of a lack of structure, a lack of purpose, a lack of direction, clarity, and really, you know, just flowing through life. And that's the result of, you know, all kinds of cultural backlash from the way we've been headed for decades.
Right. Yeah.
And we're actually,
because men are going to identify with, you know, maybe it's social, you know, circles, or if it's the school they're coming out of, or, you know, their job, you know, there's certain things they're going to identify with. And what you're saying, what I'm hearing is, you know, a lot of men they haven't really done the work yet to understand what is their balance, right? How feminine are they, to just claim that, understand that what it is in them, and be okay with it. And, yeah, I guess that's what I'm hearing. So curious too, then, is we're going to get a little, what I like to call sloppy here first, because I want to, you know, for the listeners there, like kind of let them know, like whatever they're going through or whatever they're trying to sort of understand more about, you know, I guess on their journey, development, leadership is, they're not alone in this whole thing. And I think this is the tip of the iceberg from a messaging standpoint. You know, the podcast, a lot of the work that I'm going to continue to do is that surround yourself with men that are trying to figure it out, bar none. And that is it. So, but you're about to turn 30 next week, and throughout your 20s, and maybe kind of look back to your earlier 20s, you know, 21 to 25. What was the hot mess part of your life? What was the, you know, sort of sloppiness? And you don't have to figure it out now, right? Like you haven't had it all figured out. It's kind of like you said, it's always going to be kind of this onion that we're peeling back all the layers. But what did you identify with that was really, looking back, was kind of the hot mess part?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect segue actually, because it's totally related to the feminine and how I relate to the feminine. So my hot mess was relationships with women and dating, and you know, whether that was long-term relationships or short-term relationships or sleeping around. And what I'm coming to realize now as I do this work with other men, I'm actually coming up on the tail end of a 6-month cleanse where for the last 6 months, I haven't engaged in any dating, any sex, any porn, like nothing of that sort, even flirting or avoiding eye contact. And the purpose for me behind that is learning how to meet my feminine needs within myself, you know, within my own life. And so what I was seeking in my 20s was that feminine energy. And I would choose these women, you know, throughout my 20s that were just the epitome of feminine fire and flow and energy and movement and chaos. But I didn't actually have my own shit together enough to hold down a steady relationship. And so relationship after relationship just continued to fail and devolve into fights and arguments and a lot of pain. So, you know, as you said, it's something I'm still figuring out. I think relationships are the crux for a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting to hear this, because this is lots again about age, is what you haven't been able to really understand in yourself. It's an energy or an archetype, or, you know, it's part of your conditioning, that if you haven't really understood how you fulfill it internally, you're going to seek it out through fulfillment. And it can be sex, it can be all these different things. So to your point, that's really interesting. What about on the flip side, in regards to what part of your life did you really refine? Or just put in a lot of effort and lean in, as we should say, right, early on to handle when you were younger in your 20s? What part of the, you know, I guess the sort of development phase or just part of your life did you actually really get ahead of earlier?
Yeah, I mean, whether or not it was healthy, I had a lot of that masculine drive and a lot of that purpose, almost to a point of perfectionism. So I finished my undergraduate with 2 degrees in 3 years, you know, while studying abroad in Thailand for 4 months. I finished my grad school degree in 2 years with a 4.0, you know, like basically the thing I did really well, despite whatever else might've been a mess or whatever else I was lacking, was the typical track, of you get the master's degree, finish your college education, get a job.
Yeah.
And I hit the career path really hard.
Right.
And that's, and I'm now stepping back from that a little bit more into what I actually want to be doing. But I will say that throughout my 20s, there was a lot of clear direction. At least it seemed like clear direction at the time of
Right.
where I was going career wise.
Right. Right on. So there's a lot of similarity in this for me too, right? I mean, getting the degree, working in advertising, like getting the job, doing really well. Though what for me it was mostly driven really by this achiever persona. I mean, it was like, I'm going to work harder than everybody else in the world.
Yep.
Which served me. It served me really well for a lot of years. It wasn't like I was struggling to find a job, right? Like both of us, right? There was structure around that. And we were just 21, 22. I mean, not all 21 and 22, 23-year-olds really have that experience or put in that situation. Now, what are you experiencing now, would you say? I guess the benefit of having that earlier in life.
Yeah. I mean, I like the way you described that achiever energy. And that's very much an archetype that, I took the Enneagram test. It's one of there's tons of different personality tests out there you can take. And that's what I got. And I know my whole life I've been that guy who wants to be the best at everything at any cost.
Right.
And like you said, that did serve me to a point. Yeah. And what I'm finding now is that it has alienated me in a lot of ways, from friendships, from myself, from my true purpose. Like that energy drove me to achieve, but I didn't really take the time, and that's the time I'm taking now to actually figure out, what do I really want to achieve?
Right.
And can I do that in a way that's in balance with enjoyment of life and pleasure and my own inner feminine and the feminine in the world, without having to drive myself towards perfection 24/7.
I think this is a really great opportunity. Because I wanted to ask you, right, what is a recommendation for somebody, younger, if they want to sort of pursue case structure or, degrees or a fast track to quote unquote, I guess, success that maybe aligns with their college degree or something like that. Almost what I'm hearing is, and I want you to, show up with your answer, but I'm hearing almost is like slow down before you really want to go into achievement mode and succeed on this path that maybe you've started to develop for yourself, or maybe somebody else is driving you to, create that path too. It's almost like it's going to have to get messy a little bit. And you suggest maybe slowing down a little bit, right?
Absolutely. 100%. And that was something that, I was fortunate enough, because I did graduate in 3 years. I took a year off, and it wasn't a year off, but I took a year to do something I wanted to do that I wouldn't have done otherwise. And for me, that was, I was a wilderness therapy field guide out in Utah with troubled teens. So I was backpacking in the woods and basically living out of my car, sleeping, under a tarp more days than I did in a bed. And that year in the wilderness with teens, just sort of lost, sort of not knowing my purpose, was absolutely the most influential year of my early adult life, and really continues to shape the direction that my career is heading to this day. So
what was it about that experience that still hits home for you about on the journey and like?
Yeah, I mean, it scared the shit out of me is what I would say it was. It was something that was way outside my comfort zone.
I think there it is. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was the first day interviewing for that job. It was an 8-day backpacking interview in the middle of the desert in, the middle of nowhere, Utah. And I just remember calling my girlfriend at the time and just breaking down in tears. Like, what am I doing with my life? Where am I? What is this? And it absolutely turned out to be the best decision I ever made.
Wow. That's great. And it's not going to be easy no matter what. Well, I'm curious too, then, we're faced with decisions. You had to make that decision, right, to go and do that and kind of shift gears. I mean, I made a decision to move across the country from Minnesota after college to, California. I barely knew anybody. It's like, sometimes we're running from things, but either way, there's all these decisions. I'd love to hear from you. What in the last 10 years, give us a story or a quick, sort of, piece of you that was around your hardest decision, like the hardest decision you've had to make in the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I'd say the theme of the hardest decisions, I don't know if I can narrow it down to one, but it is back to this relationship idea, is anytime I had to end a relationship. And not just romantic relationships. I think one of the hardest things I've been through, I actually had to fire one of my best friends from the company I run right now. And, that, whether we're talking about that or a romantic relationship, there's so much entanglement and so much emotion involved in these intimate relationships, that ending them is really difficult for most people. And we're not really taught, again, in terms of losing track of that masculine drive, how to do that successfully and gracefully, and with heart, but also with strength.
Right.
And for me, I just waited way too long to make those decisions, and I would stay in a relationship years past its due date.
Wow. My experience was letting them loose before it fully matured into something maybe a little more concrete.
What do you mean by that?
Flakiness, in my intimate relationships in my 20s. That was sort of my thing, where it was, I wouldn't have any problem letting it go early, really early. But, lack of the committing to it. So the less in your experience of, maybe whether you wanted to get off the bus earlier or not, just kind of that challenge. My challenge was that I still knew that I could have maybe waited a little bit longer to let it mature out before giving it a real shot.
Absolutely. And there's something to be said for both. And I think you got to trust your gut on that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And for me, when I reflect now in hindsight, I knew what the right decision was at the time. And I wasn't ready to make that call. And if you don't know that, stay in the relationship, by all means, try it out. The relationships are hard work, no matter how you cut it. Yeah,
absolutely. So what's next for you, Cody? I guess in the topic of, you've got, without going into a deeper story, you've got a lot of transition opportunities here with work and nonprofit and everything that's going on with your life. I'm curious, what's something in the next year, you are looking to learn more of, looking to experience, or just create, and what's scary about that journey for you?
Yeah, the overarching theme, I want to create a life that I'm inspired by. And, the reality is that can take many different forms. But when I look at my current work, my current living situation, it doesn't really light me up. And it's not something that I would look at and feel totally inspired by. So for me, it does mean I need a new career shift. And I think that there's lots of different forms that could take. There's things I'm pursuing, I'm happy to go into. It means moving probably to a new city. It means getting outside my comfort zone and having new travel experiences, new friendships, putting myself into situations that I wouldn't normally put myself into, in order to really find out what lights me up and what inspires me.
Right. The long term, whether it's legacy or something, that's just going to get you out of bed in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so that's my bridge, and you're not going to, all my guests are going to get this question. This is, I'm going to do a lot of work around purpose, a lot of content around it. And so my last question for you really here is, before we finish up, is, whether you have it in one sentence what your purpose is, and that's great. I want to hear it. I want the listeners to hear it, or even just if there's something you can identify with most that maybe you want to better understand it or further pursue, but if it's something you're willing to die for, right? Or it's, whatever you think is why you're here on planet Earth, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to share that. This actually is something I have, and it's close to my heart. So I share it with that in mind. And this is something that came from a journey I took down in Peru, a ceremonial retreat down there with indigenous means of healing and entheogenic plants. And essentially, the core of the purpose is I'm a student and teacher of love, and I see, people hear that word love and they get all scared and whatever, the cliches involved with it. But
Right.
For me, what we're doing here is loving each other and ourselves and the world around us. And I think as a result of that, what I see as my purpose is, in one sentence, opening people's hearts, connecting others to their gift, their passion, and in doing so, healing the planet. And that's, I'm a therapist with an environmental bent. I really think that talking about healing the planet is not something we do from a big political perspective. It's something we do one individual at a time. And if I can open people's hearts to their own passion, their own gifts, their own life that they want to create of inspiration and bring that back into the world, I think the world's going to be a much better place.
Absolutely. I'm already sure the world is a better place for you being on the planet, Cody Wiggs. I'm positive of that. Absolutely. Absolutely. So purpose, right? I mean, wow. You're grounded in it, and I know it's going to change for you. It's going to evolve for you over time. There's no doubt about that. What's one recommendation though? Like let's say you have a guy that hasn't really thought about it, right? Maybe he's in the rat race, or if he's in a similar scenario that we were in a few years back, where it's hit the ground running, maybe getting a degree, trapped in a job that maybe it pays really well, maybe it doesn't, but it doesn't light them up. Where's a place to start to figure out purpose, to figure out something bigger, bigger than us? Where do you start?
Yeah. Well, I would start, with that first part of my purpose statement, which is opening your heart. And I know that sounds fluffy, but there are actual ways to do that. And the reason I say that is because if you're trying to define your purpose from a place of numbness, we have all these ways that we numb out from our pain, from our passion, whether it's TV or social media or booze or drugs or porn or you name it, work even as a way that many people numb. If you're chasing your purpose from that place, you're just chasing your tail in circles, because you're not going to know what it is that really lights you up at your core. But if you have an experience of cracking your heart open, you'll know what that is, and that might be, there's all kinds of moments. That might actually be a moment of grief, of extreme loss, and coming face to face with the reality of death. That's something that did it for me in my life.
Right.
Or it might be a moment of inspiration where you're in nature, or you're doing, and you feel connected to the world, yourself, and people around you. And that's how you know your heart is open. And from that place, that's when you can really get in tune with and in touch with what you actually care about. But if you're walking around numbed out, good luck trying to figure out your purpose from that place.
Yeah. The blinders are on. No, for sure. I'll probably beat the drum until I'm blue in the face on this, throughout time, but it starts there. I think, it really started there for me too. I mean, I surrounded myself in men's work, and that really cracked me open in regards to just feeling like everything I've brought around in the world is okay. It's fine. So I found it in that space, but clearing out all the mess, right? Clearing out the distractions and clearing out all the sort of the numbingness like that. I never thought in it like, wow, I watch a lot of TV. I never thought I watched a lot of TV, but I really looked at it. I was like, wow, I'm really giving away 3 to 5 hours a week. I could be doing other things, doing that. And I'm just casual at it. I'm sure I'm not the only one in our age group or, our 20s that does that unconsciously, right? We're not really conscious about it. So I hear that from you. I hear that, I guess, clearing the distractions is a good place to start. And another thing that I've grabbed onto lately is, because it can be a little overbearing, right? Understanding, okay, what am I going to die for, right? What is something that's going to light me up, and figure it out right now or figure out in the next week? It's really challenging, right? And it's a lot of, it's a way to just, I'm going to figure that out later when I'm older.
Right.
But your purpose could just be, for the next 3 months, is just to explore purpose, right? It can just be pick up an activity 2 hours a week that just explores different things in a non-distracted, non-numbing sort of mind state, right? But I guess giving yourself a break there on that front is a little easier way to approach it.
Well, and part of what I hear you saying too is doing things that confront that fear, right? Because if we're chasing, what am I going to die for? And we approach that from a place of fear of oh my God, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what I'm doing. How am I going to figure my life out? And so intentionally doing activities that bring up fear for you. You know, like one thing I'm approaching here is an improv class, which is way outside of my comfort zone and not something I would ever consider.
I had a private improv teacher come to my apartment in Los Angeles. I don't think I ever told you that.
Nice.
Oh,
I want to talk to you about that. Yeah.
I was terrified. But it was a great learning. So it was like 6 weeks of it. It was very uncomfortable, but I learned a lot about getting just present, you know, comfortable.
Yeah. And then approach your purpose from a place that's not fear-based, you know, that's open and that's connected with what you really care about. And you'll know in your gut, what is it that really, like you said, I could die for.
Right. On that note, I thank you, brother, for coming on the show. I really do. I've learned a lot from you. I love how you show up. Continue to be seeing you around. Obviously, we're very involved in the next year on a men's, leadership, training all year long. So thanks so much, brother. If you got anything else to say, I'm happy to give you a few extra minutes. Otherwise, we'll wrap it. And again, thank you so much.
Yeah. Happy to do this anytime. Much love.
All right. Thanks, brother.